Okay, guys, in this script, we're going to be going through a very sensitive topic, which is essentially what happens when judges interact with claimants looking to get disability benefits. And you guessed it, they have been prescribed or purchased or given or somehow finagled a little bit of drugs. And we're going to be going through essentially the questions that they ask of those claimants. We're going to be going through a lot of details so you know exactly how this thing works. Now, while we go through this video, try to keep an open mind. Not everybody lives in the perfect little clamshell that you like to think you live in. Cool. Not everybody has the squeaky clean record like you do. Awesome. But try and keep an open mind when we go through this process that some people just did not go down the right paths in life, no matter where they started. It could have been super rich kids, it could have been have absolutely nothing and made tough choices, been forced into situations, etc. Okay. So also, if you like these videos, please remember to hit that like button. I know a lot of people sit there and they just let their hand hover over it. Don't be afraid to click it. It's okay. It'll be fine. Now, here we go. There are 4 categories that you need to be aware of when it comes to this type of video. There are legally prescribed drugs for your impairments. There are over-the-counter drugs. There are illegal drugs. And then there's this quasi-legal, illegal drugs category. Okay, so what are each one of these, right? Legally prescribed drugs for your impairments. Okay, so these are where your doctor legally gives you the right to access these medications. That's what it is. That's what it comes down to. Number 2, the over-the-counter drugs. That's where your local gas station legally gives you the right to access those medications. Cool, that's what it is. Number 3, illegal drugs. That fake friend who complains about the street you live on legally drops off these illegal narcotics. I'm kidding, it's all legal. Whole thing's illegal there. Number 4, the quasi-legal / illegal drugs. That generally cool, but sometimes ignores you friend sells you statewide legal drugs that are legal and cool and fine, but are also federally illegal. And also illegal because you didn't pay taxes on them. That's the big thing here, guys. That's the big thing. So with that said, those are basically your 4 categories: legally prescribed, illegal, over the counter, quasi-legal / illegal. Now, I understand that you were looking for those practical application definitions. I hope they sufficed. Now, the disability ALJs, which stands for disability judges, administrative law judges. But if you want to act cool, you're going to call them ALJs because, we're talking about acting cool in this video, which is not what you should be when it comes to using, but that's what it seems to be in society. They think it's cool. People do it because they think it's cool. They do it socially. These administrative law judges come across the wide expanse of unique, beautiful, and genuinely terrifying human beings. Judges are trained to assess people in detail. Like that training where they're like, everybody's equal and wonderful and perfect, and you have to give everybody the same shot, and da da da. That's not how it works. Not in law. In law, the way it works is, they'll basically look at, what are the tattoos on the person's body saying? What are the facial signs of narcotic use? How recent do things look on their skin when it comes to skin deterioration? How do their teeth look? Why are they covered in acne at 43 years old? Why do they keep nodding off during the hearing? It's more about taking what's in the totality of the circumstances and creating an assessment as to what the person is before them. Now, here's a sampling of 5 questions disability judges will usually ask when someone has the potential of using illegal drugs. Number 1, do you use illegal drugs, including pot? Or they might phrase it as, I noticed in the record that they're talking about this particular drug. Are you still using it? Or they'll phrase it, hey, can you explain to me, I noticed your doctor gave you a walkthrough on what this particular drug can do to your body over time. Can you explain a little bit to me as to why that was a necessary instruction on behalf of your physician? Right? There's lots of ways that they can approach this question, but we're just going to simplify it. Do you use illegal drugs, including pot? Judges, they usually like to choose questions that are not going to be this really mean, push the finger into you kind of phrasing. They like to kind of ease into it. with these questions about drugs. They might start with medically prescribed drugs and asking questions about those, or they might go into the quasi category, like with marijuana. They might do an intro statement where they say they're not trying to embarrass you as the claimant. They would just want to ask you some questions. You're not going to jail, stuff like that. But either way, some of these judges like to slide into the category slowly. And a few of these judges like to hammer you with narcotic questions right into the conversation. No warm up, bam, you're getting hit. That's just how it works. Tammy Wright, thank you for the $4.99 donation. That's awesome. That's super on the live stream. Very cool. I have, I'm not going to say his name next week. Thank you for your videos. He is an Orlando-based judge. I cannot say any positive or negative things about Judge Ocampo. He is a great judge. He is a really, really great judge. He's a very fair judge. He takes a lot of time to review the record. He is a great judge. That's the bottom line. Julio Ocampo is an amazing judge. To be fair, I've actually aspired many times in listening to the audio over again to the types of questions he asks and studying specifically what vocational expert analysis he does and then how he phrases his questions. He's a very good judge to have. Very good judge. With that said, when it comes to, basically these negatives, the judges will then flow from that do you use illegal drugs question into, well, okay, how many hits or injections do you do? I mean, how many times have you used or abused within the past month? Then they boil it down. How many times have they used or abused within the past week? And they boil it down. On that day, what happened? And they boil it down. If you quit using and abusing, which is usually where claimants go with this stuff, like they'll usually come through and they'll be like, okay, and then I quit on this day or this month, or it's been 17 months since I've used, 5 months since I've used, 3 months since I've used. If you quit, they're going to want to know when and how you quit. The when, it comes in one of two categories. It's either they know the exact day because they were part of a program and the program was teaching them and they figured it out and they knew from there and that was their day and they're counting days from then. Or it's like a general, like, it was like 10 months ago. It was like 8 months ago. It was like 15 months ago. Now, when the judges hear like, oh, it's been about 3 months, for people who don't use and abuse, there's like a little sigh in our head, like, okay, so you really haven't quit yet. You're just in the beginnings of the idea of quitting. But for people who use and abuse, 3 months is friggin' huge. That's a giant river worth of time. Now, judges will sometimes basically go into other categories first. And I think this is important to kind of think about and realize, because when they go from this to slide into drugs, it's smoother and the claimant feels more welcome to those questions. They don't seem as aggressive. They don't seem as mean when they get into the narcotics. So a judge might start with these questions instead. Do you smoke cigarettes? Do you smoke e-cigarettes or vapes? So one thing that most people know is that people who use illegal drugs usually smoke, right? There's a giant correlation between those two. People who smoke sometimes go on to heavier stuff. People who smoke sometimes don't. But the people who go on to heavier stuff, a lot of them smoke, right? If they're in, and I'm going to teach you a little trick here that the judges know about. When the judge will ask, okay, so what do you smoke? Right? If it's a situation where they're smoking cigarettes, the judge might ask them, okay, well, what kind of cigarettes? Because that's going to dictate. If they're smoking Newports, they got money, right? They've got good money. If they're smoking like, those little crappy cigars that burn your throat, that means they don't have money. That means they're super low income or they're homeless, because nobody would smoke those without literally it being dire need for them to get the tobacco, while at the same time, basically not being able to afford their addiction to cigarettes and nicotine. So the judge might ask, and the person will be like, oh, I vape. And the person doesn't have a job. And the person has claimed that nobody helps them. And the person has claimed that basically they're homeless and they have nothing. Homeless people do not, for the most part, vape unless they have a parent, cousin, friend, whatever, that is giving them a place to stay or is giving them extra money or whatever. Okay. That's just a little trick where the judges, when they hear somebody say, yeah, I vape, right? Because some people will think the judges will hear that and that's better than not having whatchamacallit, than not having, for example, like full on cigarettes, like the Marlboro Man, the Cowboy Killers kind of cigarettes. So the point is there that the judges obviously would prefer with many of them that they don't smoke, that they not actually smoke. There is one judge who would consistently bring up that she would ask the claimants if they smoked, and then she would give a disclaimer to them that you know she did not want the benefits being used if approved for cigarettes, even though they're not illegal. So that's just something to keep in mind. The judges will go into, okay, how many packs a day? If you quit, when and how? What programs did you use to quit? Something that judges don't really get into, which I've always wondered about why that is. Some judges that come from like Louisiana, Mississippi, kind of like those types of places, Kentucky, they'll ask about dip, which is like the little jar. But other judges like California, New York, Florida, they don't really ask about dip. It just doesn't pop up. Next thing is this. When they say, how did you quit? Whether it's for narcotics, whether it's for cigarettes, whatever, the judges know that a person's brain when it comes to smoking or drugs. And I know the smokers always tell me, they're always like, it's way worse than having a narcotic addiction. And I bless your heart, bless your very, very confused heart. But no, smoking cigarettes, that addiction is nowhere near as bad as somebody who's been smoking, crack cocaine for 15 years. And it's important that we acknowledge that those are two completely different standards of addiction, completely different. And there's always going to be somebody in the chats like, no, cigarettes are really, they're way hard. They're not. They're not. You can make that argument. They're not. They're just not. Okay. You're not going to end up in jail ruining your life almost every single time because of cigarettes. That's just not how they work. Some people smoke a lot. Some people smoke 2 packs a day. Some people spend that much money on it. They've got to buy cartons after cartons. They literally drive up to a state where there's no sales tax on it. I get it. But you can drive to another state to buy cartons of it because you still have your job. It's just not the same. So what the judge is looking for is specific programs that the person used to get off of these, cigarettes, narcotics, whatever. And let me give you an example of what a program is, because this is important because claimants have made this mistake before. A program that they're looking for is like an AA. It's like, one of those, like you go to a meeting, once a week, once a month, you sit down, you talk about stuff, etc. The more hardcore the drugs are, the more they expect you to be in a program, an inpatient program. Let me give you an example of an inpatient program. An inpatient program is where you go to it. For the first 3 to 4 weeks, they take away your phone. You don't have access to it. You live in a tiny room. You go to meetings. You have to do stuff for that facility. Sometimes you were court ordered to be there. Sometimes you just had to go there. That is an inpatient program. Another example of an inpatient program is when you go to jail. That is an inpatient drug program. Prison, inpatient drug program. Okay. So you have to understand, if you're like, yeah, I had a buddy and they talked me out of using heroin and golly, I've just been super great since then the judge is going to be very suspect. Because if your buddy is not named Jesus, then there's a little bit of a gap there as to how effective your buddy was at getting you to stop using and abusing. So with that said, another thing that they usually look into is how much alcohol you're drinking. Because once again, using narcotics or smoking, there's usually a correlation there where you're going to be seeing more and more alcohol use. And, alcohol is different for all kinds of people. Some people like wine, some people like, spirits, some people like beer, whatever. I tend to like those lemonades that have like the fruit stuff. I know it's not a manly thing to say, but man, those things taste amazing, but I just don't drink much. Like I'll have one of those. What I'll do is I'll buy a 12 pack and then the 12 pack will sit in there as an 11 pack. So I'll have one, and then for the rest of the year, nobody will touch them. Until recently, my father basically tried one because he was like, what is this? Why is this always sitting in this fridge taking up all this space? Now he drinks them. So it's cool. I have my like one, hard lemonade for the year. And then basically the rest of the time I just don't drink them because, it just is what it is. Like, I think it's cool to have one time, or sometimes I'm like, I'm going to be rebellious. I'll have my lemonade, little sprinkles of alcohol. And then I drink it. And then after that, I'm like, I don't feel so good. What happened? And then basically I just don't drink that. So literally what I have right now, what I've been drinking is water, the expensive water, which by the way, what is with these on it? I haven't had Dasani in forever because it was always like the rich kid water. What is with the caps? I mean, you cannot actually look at that. What are you gonna do? You can literally twist this and just have it spin. Like this is not how a Dasani is. But I remember when Dasani, you would have all these little crisscrosses and checks, and like the actual plastic was like it was like a work of art. And now it's like you could not trust this thing to flip it upside down on top of the computer. It would ruin the computer. So, anyways, I drink water with lemonade in it. That's my spiked lemonade experience. All right, now, how many glasses? How many shots a week? Now, remember, a lot of judges they drink. A lot of judges drink. So when you start talking about this stuff, they're going to some of them kind of like quasi secretly, you know, ask really detailed questions about your alcohol use that only alcoholics would know. And we as attorneys will sit back and just play along because there's no way we are getting in between their alcohol use and our clients' alcohol use and the wonderful relationship they're forming as a result of that. So just be aware, judges know a lot about alcohol sometimes. Some of them have a drinking problem. It's part of the nature of it. It exists. It just is what it is. Now, another thing that they like to look to when it comes to alcohol is, essentially the medical records as to, when you showed up, did you have anything in you? And that's across the board, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, marijuana, whatever. And so when they look at this stuff and they check through essentially, what's in the medical record, they'll know specifically a date and time, which was the last date and time that they found drug use and abuse. I'm going to tell you the secret to it. When you have access to the medical records, which a lot of you won't, they'll be inside the ERE and the F folder, which is where all the medical records get stored in electronic records express. So what happens is if the medical record document is a clean enough scan of a PDF, then you use a program to control find on there, specifically the words for, narcotics, heroin, stuff like that. And you search those words and you look for them to pop up, or you look for the equivalent of them in medical terminology for it to pop up, drug screening, drug tests, whatever. And then what you find is the last date in the medical record that basically the claimant used and abused that they noted. Now, one of the problems with this is that doctors will sometimes write something and then they will copy and paste it multiple times over and over, visit after visit. So you might have somebody who, 10 months ago stopped using, heroin, but, they'll go ahead and copy and paste their note that says, had a discussion with claimant about, or had a discussion with patient about heroin use and abuse from current usage, blah, blah, blah. And they'll just copy and paste that visit after visit after visit. So what you've got to do is you've got to look at the visits above that and see if there's copy and pasted language or language that's very similar and things like that, because it's so crucial. Because when that pops up, you have to be aware that sometimes the doctors, they're not necessarily lazy, but they like to copy and paste just like everybody else. So that's a negative, because if they copy and paste and they change the wording a little bit here and there, it looks like, even if it's not accurate, that the claimant was using and abusing that visit, that visit, that visit, that visit. And the expectation, the thought pattern is that the claimant then basically was using not only on those dates in front of the doctor, but also in between those dates. Okay. Next one. Here's another thing that they'll usually ask. Do you panhandle or do any other activity for additional money? Do you panhandle? Now, panhandling is the official job of being homeless, right? That's how we all know it. When you're homeless, you want to get money. It's either going to be donating plasma, donating blood, donating something else, being in a program where they basically watch you and you take medication, or you're panhandling. Like, those are the options. That's how you make money when you're homeless. So, bottom line is, or you're watching kids, right? So the bottom line is, when the judge asks, okay, are you panhandling? How do you afford your cigarettes? How do you afford the drugs? How do you afford the this? How do you afford the that? If you have a phone number and they call it, and it goes to like some audio track that makes it sound like you have like a higher end system, like not just a free pay phone, right? Then they're going to be wondering, okay, how does this person have the money? Are they working under the table? Are they donating somehow? Are they watching somebody else's kids? How do they have the money to go ahead and basically afford these things? Panhandling. So, panhandling, the usual thing is you can see in the record when somebody was basically arrested for panhandling. They're in, they're out. They're in, they're out. One of the big complaints that a lot of the sheriffs and police have is that they always put people away and then they get out really quickly. And my response to that is, well, that is certainly true for the really bad drug dealers. It's not so true for those who basically are panhandling, because realistically, and I get why they arrest him, and I get it, and I get the really dumb things that the cities are doing, where the cities will make pre-designated boxes in the city where people are allowed to stand to panhandle and ask for money from cars driving by. Would it not be better, just as a county, state, federal, to build housing and actually house them and try to go ahead and give them education platform options to learn a field? I don't mean our BS school system that we have, where they're learning theories, about doctrine, about doctrines. I mean physical, actual skill, how to sew, how to do electrical work, how to do welding, etc. Right? A lot of homeless people are homeless because they are disabled. No doubt about it. You get into the situation where you have mental impairments or physical impairments and you can't do the job you once did. But where there's a big like mishap or missed opportunity is that people pigeonhole themselves into like, I used to do this, I can only do this. Now I'll go homeless because I can't do that. And so what you have to realize is that if you can't do that, you have to be open to doing this job that's below it in your head to still make money. A lot of people don't. They get stuck on the high horse and they're like, well, I'm not going to go work for Walmart, so I'll just go homeless. And that's literally what happens. It doesn't make sense to most people that hear that, but that's literally what happens. So we've gone through essentially questions that judges will usually ask, the 4 categories, basically of what exists for the types of drugs that are out there: the legally prescribed drugs, the over-the-counter drugs, the illegal drugs, and the quasi-legal/illegal drugs. I want to tell you about the materiality clause, which is where basically the judges will look at the claim and see if the drugs were material in causing the impairments to become severe. If you have a claimant who is an abuser, and basically they're in the moderate category, but then they have these like severe emergency crisis, emergency room visits. If the person has drugs in their system when this happens, and they mark the disabilities, the disabling, impairments as severe, then that would be material to causing the impairments to become more severe. Even if they weren't, in the eyes of the SSA, it becomes a material thing in causing the impairments to become more severe. Now, I've had claimants where they only show up at the hospital if they have drugs in their system, and they only have a behavioral institute or sanatorium visit if they have drugs in their system. And so the problem for the judges is they then have to decide, were these drugs material in causing their impairments to become really bad, really severe, really extreme? And if they weren't on drugs, would they just be moderate or mild or not even disabled at all? And so that's the whole material element that they're looking at when they look through the medical record, vocational record, penal record, prison and jail, and then basically from the testimony given at the hearing. Now, guys, with that said, we have one more video, which is on the future commissioner of the Social Security Administration. I'm going to give myself about 10 minutes of break time to go ahead and basically relax. And then I will be back to go ahead and tell you all the things that President Biden wants to go ahead and change at the SSA program, and essentially how Commissioner Martin O'Malley, who is the official new commissioner, who has replaced Commissioner Kijakazi, will be going forward with some of those actions and trying to make things work better. Attorney Walter Knott, please, please, please remember to go ahead and use the like button. Don't be stingy with the likes. We only have 54 likes. I want to see that go up. Also, please remember to subscribe, click the all button. We have a membership option now if you like to support the channel. And then also, very super duper important, if you want to leave a review, go to Google and type in Disability Resolution Florida or Disability Resolution Law Firm. I will catch you guys a little bit later. You have a wonderful night, and I will see you in about 15 minutes. I'm going to let the dogs out real quick and then pop back and we'll do the big, amazing announcement video going through the details of what you can expect from the Social Security Administration going forward under the new management of Commissioner Martin O'Malley. I'll see you soon. Give me about 15 minutes. All right. I'll catch you a little bit later. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.